Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lynchburg Museum. I'm Doug Harvey, and we're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. Make a couple of announcements, and then we'll be getting into our program. First, I'd like to welcome you to the building and let you know that the restrooms and water fountain are on the lower floor. There's an elevator in the hallway to the rear, or the steps also go up. But there's a quilt exhibit on the top floor, and then downstairs is where we have the railroad exhibit, and then there are 4 galleries to the rear on this floor, so you're welcome to tour the building after the program. We've got some other events that are coming up the rest of this fall. Dr. Barbara Rothamel from Lynchburg College is going to speak here on September 16th about the history of quilts. She's also the director of the Dar Gallery at Lynchburg College. Then we have our annual fall festival at Point of Honor on October 1st, Day at the Point. And we've got lots of food and music and animals for kids, and so that's a big day. This year we've added something special. We've got the Antique Automobile Club coming, and we've also got the Piedmont automobile that was made in Lynchburg. They're extremely rare, but a local resident has one, and he's going to bring it to Point of Honor that day. If you know where Flowers Bakery is on Bedford Avenue, that was the site of the Piedmont Automobile Company. Then on November 11th, Veterans Day, Colleen Callahan, who's the curator emeritus of the Valentine Museum's expansive and extensive costume collection, Colleen is going to be here talking about how to preserve your family heirlooms of quilts and wedding dresses and other textiles. And then that's also Veterans Day, and Point of Honor will be open for free. Finally, on Sunday, December 4th, we will have Christmas Open House at Point of Honor. Every year we have live music in the parlor with Riddle on the harp, the 3 women that do a beautiful job. And this year we're doing something a little different. We usually do Christmas in 1815. This year we're doing a Victorian Christmas, which is at a time when the Lynchburg family lived there. We're glad to have our members here today, and encourage any of you who are not members we'd love to have you join. The memberships are one of the ways that we are able to pay for and conduct programs like this. Our foundation also helps us fund exhibits and restoration of artifacts and lots of other things, so we're blessed to have that. It is my privilege today to introduce Howard Gregory. Howard, our speaker, is a Lynchburg native, and he first worked for the Southern Railway, so you can see that the railroad has been with him for a long time. After several years with the railway, he went to work in law enforcement and served with the Virginia State Police from 1966 until 2004, retiring as an Appomattox Division commander. Howard is a historian and author. He's author of 2 regimental histories, the 38th and 53rd Virginia regiments, and also the author of the book, The History of the Wreck of the Old 97. And without further ado, we're going to start his theme song for us.
Fatal day, a train wreck took place on a small railroad curve up in Virginia that would find its place in America's folk history for years to come. It happened between Monroe and Spencer, Virginia, and the engineer was a man named Joe Brody. Joe was known as something of a daredevil, so he decided he could easily make up some lost time in the throttle. Well, Joe lost more than a little time that day, and a song was written about the accident. It was one of the very early country hit songs by Vernon Dalhart back in 1925, and even a million-seller. And to add to its lore and legend, it was the very first record ever recorded by, you guessed it, the Statler Brothers. They recorded it in 1964, and because you asked, they're going to sing it again tonight. The Statlers and the Wreck of the Old 97.
Your baby, I'm Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Doug. Certainly appreciate the introduction, and certainly appreciate each of you all being here today for us to exchange information, to share our interests. It's always a pleasure to share interest in railroad history and to swap information. I'll usually learn something every time we do one of these talks. But as Doug said, I've had a fascination for railroad history since growing up here in Lynchburg as a child. I was fortunate to go to work for the Southern Railway, and at the time I was a telegrapher operator out at Montview Tower, which is no longer there, but it was located out close to the Ridge Mall, if you know where that is, just north of there, and controlled all of the signals and switches through Lynchburg, which now it's controlled from someplace, Jacksonville or somewhere far away, but back at that time it was controlled locally, which was quite a pleasure to do that. But as you heard here, the wreck of the old 97, and I don't think it would apply to anyone in this room, but I've heard sometimes you say something to a young person about the wreck of old 97, they just give you a real, deer in the headlights look. You never heard of it, don't know what you're talking about. Again, I don't think that would apply to anyone here, or you wouldn't be here in the first place. But it is a fascinating story, and made fascinating by the song. I would be the first to admit that without that song, probably none of us would have ever heard about that wreck today. There have been other, even worse train wrecks. For example, on July 2nd, 1889, up at Thaxton between Bedford and Roanoke, there was a washout on the N&W Railway, Norfolk and Western. A passenger train number 2 collapsed in that washout there, caught on fire, and killed a total of 18 people, which was worse than 97. But till fairly recently, no one had ever heard about that too much. There's a good book out on that, if that interests you, Lost at Thaxton. Lost at Thaxton, and this author, Michael Jones, has done a fantastic job of documenting what took place up there and gone back into great detail. So if this sort of thing interests you, you may want to keep that in mind. Another train wreck occurred on November 29th, 1906, just south of Lynchburg here, near Lawyers. Killed the president of the Southern Railway, Samuel B. Spencer. If you're working on the railroad and you're involved in a wreck that kills the president, it's really not a very good career move for you. But nevertheless, it was a tragedy and killed President Spencer, and President Spencer was the namesake of Spencer, North Carolina, was named in his honor. But again, that's another story in and of itself. It killed him along with several other people there on November 29, 1906. Old 97, though, it's become a part of our folklore. Many people, and you talk to more people, you find out that so many folks, their ancestors had some sort of a connection to that train wreck. It fascinated me, and I was over in Danville one day and overheard someone in a restaurant talking, and just overheard the conversation, and I could tell they were totally confused about the details of the wreck. And I thought, well, you can find a book about most anything, but there was nothing in print at that time about the wreck of old 97. So I went, documented what I had and put it together in this little booklet about the wreck of old 97, which is now out of print. I'm not selling them anymore, it's out of print. But it was a lot of fun researching and putting that together. But fairly recently, another gentleman over in Danville, Dr. Larry Aaron, has done another book on the wreck of old 97. I wrote the foreword for him for his book, and that is available in print. If you go to any of the local bookstores, you should be able to track down either one of these two books if you're interested in these. But today we'll be talking about old 97 in particular and what happened in that tragedy. On Sunday, November 2nd, 1902, the Mail and Express train number 97 was placed in service on the Southern Railway running south from Washington to Atlanta. This is a marker over in Danville, if you're going through Danville on Route 58, near the scene of where the wreck occurred. And I hope you can all read that. I'll read the marker for you. Here on September 27th, 1903, occurred the railroad wreck that inspired the popular ballad, The Wreck of the Old 97. The southbound Mail Express train on the Southern Railroad left the tracks on a trestle and plunged into the ravine below. 9 persons were killed and 7 injured. one of the worst train wrecks in Virginia history. And we'll come back and we'll talk some more about this marker in a few minutes, that you can't always totally believe everything that's on the marker. There can be some inaccuracies there too. We'll come back to some on that. But that's the marker over there. But at any rate, the train was placed in service on November 2nd, 1902. And of course, the wreck happened in September 1903, so it was really not that old of a train. But you can see here, if you can see on that, running from Washington on down to Atlanta, carrying nothing but mail and express. It carried no passengers. You know, today when we have cell phones and iPads and Facebook and Skype and all these type things, we don't think about. Back in 1903, letters were one of the best ways that people could generally communicate. Occasionally get to a telephone, or telegraph, but letters were much more important to those people than they are to us today. So the Southern Railway had entered into a contract with the United States Postal Service and were paid $140,000 a year for this mail and express train that ran south from Washington to Atlanta. There was no northbound counterpart to the train for whatever reason. But as you can see here on the map, it shows the route through Virginia down the Southern Railway, coming on down to Monroe, Lynchburg, and on over to Danville, where the wreck occurred. This is a picture of Monroe, Virginia, that I took about 1957 or so, with the diesel leaving over there. But honestly, the Monroe had not changed a great deal from 1903. This is where the train came from. And let me add, too, if any of you want to discuss something, please feel free to interrupt me anytime, and we can kick around anything that's on your mind, any comments that you would like to make. But this shows what Monroe looked like at the time. If you went back over to Monroe today, you wouldn't see anything there. It's, I think, one track going through there and absolutely hardly anything to see. You'd never know that was a rail point. But on this particular day, September 27th, 1903, the train was late leaving Washington because of waiting for mail cars from the north, from Philadelphia or further north for some reason. It was due to leave Washington's Union Station at 9 a.m., but because of that delay, did not get to leave until about an hour later. And it came on south from Washington to Monroe, 166 miles, and pulled in there still about an hour late, close to an hour late, when it pulled into Monroe. Monroe at that time was what is called a division point of the Southern Railway, and they would change the steam engines and change crews in Monroe. A fresh engine would be put on, and a fresh crew would take over to run the train another 166 miles on to Spencer, North Carolina, with a normal running time of 4 hours and 15 minutes. That calculates out to just under 40 miles an hour average speed, which, I think 40 miles an hour, that's not very much, but when you think about the type of rail they were running on, much lighter rail than what is there today, a single track, curves, and so forth, to maintain an average of 40 miles an hour, you have to run pretty good to stay with that. But there at Monroe, a fresh crew took over the train, and this was an extra crew that took over that day. The regular crew had been put on a southbound train, the crew that should have been running it. So this extra crew took over that particular day. This was the engineer, Joseph Andrew, nicknamed Steve Brodie. And I've been told the correct pronunciation of his name is Brodie as opposed to Brody, although you normally call it Brody because some people who knew him said that's the way that they pronounced the name. He was the extra engineer that day, and he had been on the Southern Railway for only about 1 month, come to work on the Southern back in August of 1903. Prior to that, he'd been an engineer on the Norfolk and Western Railway's Pocahontas Division, out in West Virginia, and also on the Seaboard Airline Division down in North Carolina between Raleigh and Monroe, North Carolina, and then come over to the Southern. He had made a number of trips on the Southern in those roughly 30 days he had been there. Some of the stories say that this was his first run over the Danville Division, and that is not true. We found documentation that he'd made about 30 trips over the division, but this could have been his first trip with 97. We really don't know. You hear him say in the song, they handed him his orders at Monroe, Virginia, saying, "Steve, you must put her in Spencer on time." That is not true. That's one of the errors in the song. No one would ever tell an engineer to get somewhere and make up time, and it would have been impossible to do so anyway. It is quite possible he may have got orders to run 1 hour late from Monroe to Spencer. The purpose of that is that this was a crack hotshot train and had superior timetable rights over all other trains. And what that meant was that wherever that 97 was due, any other first class or passenger train had to clear the time by 10 minutes. That is, find a siding and get on a siding at least 10 minutes ahead of 97. Any freight train had to clear 30 minutes, be in a siding 30 minutes before 97 was due. So by the dispatcher issuing an order to run 1 hour late, that would give these other trains more time on the track. So anyway, he did not get such an order as that. His fireman on that trip was Albion G. Buddy Clapp, whose photograph is here, from Whitsett, North Carolina. You can see him, young man, and both of them are young. Both of them were 33 years old. This is the conductor, John Thomas Blair, from whose family lived in Danville, Virginia. He was 37 years old, the conductor on the left here, and the flagman, James Robert Moody. So all relatively young men, and railroading was a young man's game back at that time. But they took over here in Monroe, as we said, and started out south, coming on south here, coming toward Lynchburg. Now this is the trestle who was just on the news here in Lynchburg the other night for someone out there trespassing on that trestle. There have been, I believe, 13 deaths of people killed on this trestle. This is not the trestle that 97 came across. This one was put in about 1912 over behind Riverside Park, any of you that are familiar with that area. But this is a photograph taken over there in the early 1960s, when you can see the track was taken up. Too far there. This track here was taken up right there. The southbound track is now a single track across that trestle. But anyway, 97 did not come that route, but followed the old road bed, which the old road bed in quite a few places deviates from where the Southern Railway, or Nats Norfolk Southern Railway, deviates in quite a few places from where it runs today. This is Kemper Street Station in Lynchburg that was built about 1912. And this, again, is not where 97 came in. This was not there when 97 was running. Rather, these are the piers across the James River that you can still see today. And these carry the old mainline track from Monroe on down across the river right here on into downtown Lynchburg, just down below 9th Street here. If you look out the front door and look all the way down the hill, you can see down to the bottom of 9th Street. And that's the route 97 followed coming in. This is the Union Station as it appeared at that time in 1903. It's gone now. You can see right over here, if you can spot it where it says Wright and Craig Hill, that building is now Amazement Square. For those of you who may be familiar with the Children's Museum there at Amazement Square. This was the Union Station. The Norfolk and Western Railway tracks were over here at the left. The Southern Railway main line is right through here, going right through that tunnel, and went down the middle of Jefferson Street. I can recall when the tracks went down the middle of Jefferson Street. You can still see the tunnel portal right here. If you go down there, this area has been filled in a lot, and you can see this end of the tunnel. On the other end of the tunnel, you can't even tell if there's ever a tunnel there. It's completely paved over, and you'd never know that a railroad track went down the middle of the street there. But at any rate, number 97 pulled into here, still running late. It pulled in here, and a young man, Wentworth Armistead, 17 years old, who was employed by the Southern Express Company as a safe locker. And his job was to get on the train, unlock the safe, load the valuables, relock the safe, and get off. as a precaution against train robbers out in a rural area stopping the train. If they stopped the train out in the country, no one on there could open the safe. Only employees in a station could open the safe. For whatever reason, Wentworth Armistead, whose father was a captain with the Lynchburg Fire Department here, Wentworth got on the train, did his job of loading the safe, but for some reason failed to get off that day. We don't know if the engineer and, as we said, the engineer and the conductor were new to this train. It was not their regular routine. So maybe the train started moving before he could get off. He probably could have flagged it down there in Jefferson Street, but for whatever reason, Wentworth Armistead decided to ride on over to Danville that day. And we can imagine on a Sunday afternoon, prior to video games and all the things that take up young people's time today, that might have been one of the most exciting things to do for a young man. But at any rate, he decided to ride on over to Danville. The train left Lynchburg at 1:27 p.m., still about an hour and 10 minutes late en route to Danville. This is another view of a photograph I took in 1957. You can see a little bit more here of the where 97 came in on this track and went through the tunnel there. And you can see the Norfolk and Western Railway tracks over on the left side there. And of course, this depot has been torn down. You would never know anything was ever there if you went down to the foot of 9th Street here. But again, all this took place right down the street from where we are. This is a photograph of the, rather a painting of the train as it would have looked with engine 1102. This was a brand new steam locomotive built by the Baldwin Locomotive Company and delivered to the Southern in August, just the previous month, a brand new locomotive. And had 4 cars, 2 postal cars, a baggage car, and 1 express car on the train, a total of 4 cars. So that engine could easily, get a quite powerful engine. It could get quite a bit of speed up going. But this is what it would have looked like as it hurtled on toward Danville. The train came past Franklin Junction. At one time, there was some indication it stopped here at Franklin Junction. Franklin Junction is now Gretna today. Any of you that are familiar with Gretna, it was called Franklin Junction back at that time. And you can, if you're over there, you can still see the concrete pedestals for this water tower still there. Of course, the water tower was gone and the station was gone, and they've got a caboose setting up there at the location now, but you can still see where that took place. Initially, that was, in fact, I thought for a while the train stopped there to take on water, but I found out later, going through court records and transcripts of civil cases in court in 1905, that when the train left down here at the foot of 9th Street on that fateful day, it continued on until it wrecked over in Danville. It did not stop here in Danville. It continued on south past the depot at Chatham. Now this is the new depot that was put there around 1912 or so. The old depot was down on this lower level here that you can see. This building's been demolished now too, but this was the old main line coming down through here through Chatham. That's Route 57 intersecting right there. It continued on south past this building. This was the depot at Fall Creek, as they called it. It was after the track was abandoned here in the mid-1930s. Some people lived in this old depot, and then in the 1970s, it was turned into the old 97 Steakhouse. Made a restaurant out of it. It was a good steakhouse, good place to eat. But tragically, in 1997, there was a short circuit, and this burned to the ground, burned up everything in it. So that depot is gone. There's nothing there now.
Is that in 97?
Sir?
That's ironic. It was in 1997.
It burned down. You're exactly right. That was it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was the year. Something haunting or spooky about that number. Well, you can see here where the track went right in front of the depot and on through the break in the trees there as it went on toward Danville. But again, the train was running at a good rate of speed. But again, the engineer could not have made up much time that particular day going on toward Danville. This is the Danville Depot, which once again was not the depot that 97 was headed toward, at least not in this location. around the 1912 or so, this depot was moved a couple of hundred yards from the left over to set it where it is now on the track, because the track was relocated in about 1912. The new track was put through there. So this came through a track over to the far left of this photograph. This is a map of Danville, and it shows, I know it's probably hard for some of you to see it, and those of you on the left side over there, I can't very well point it out to you, but the old main line of the Southern came down through Danville, right along through here, till it got to a sharp curve where a steel house trestle was located. This was a trestle 325 feet long, about 45 feet high, over Steelhouse Creek, and it sat right next to the Dan River Cotton Mill. This is a then and now diagram of what was there plus what's there now. Route 58 comes through here now, but Route 58 was not there at that time. It was built in the 1940s. At that time, the train track came, Southern Main Line came down through here, around this curve, and onto the trestle. The train actually was going at a high rate of speed and derailed right along in here and crashed into this ravine right along here. And we'll have some photographs of that in just a moment, and as well as these photographs in the back of the room that you can see. This is a photograph of the trestle showing what it looked like. Looking back to the north, the train would have been coming directly toward us at the time at this high rate of speed. And right up in here is Henry Street Crossing, which is still there. And until fairly recently, although the track was gone, if you drove down Henry Street, there was still a hump. When you went across that where the track used to be, you could tell exactly where it was. But this is what the trestle looked like shortly after that. It came on south, and this is a gentleman, Mr. John Wiley, who was an eyewitness to what took place that day. Mr. Wiley was born in 1887. He was about 16 years old at the time. And again, before young people had iPads and video games and all these things they have today, he and a young lady friend, I would say girlfriend, but he corrected me. He said she was not his girlfriend. She was just a girl friend. But at any rate, they were out there on the bank that day and saw the train when it was coming. And I had the pleasure to interview Mr. Wiley. He passed away in 1987 at 100 years old, but was quite a gentleman, a fascinating gentleman to talk to. And he had a clear recollection of what happened to the wreck. This is close to the mark. Has been moved a little bit further back in the direction we're looking, but still you get some idea of it. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to let Mr. Wiley tell you about what he saw that day. So if you will, listen up and see if this will work correctly.
When he was coming over the mountain, I could tell by the sound of his whistle that he was running awful fast. And I told this girl, I said, he'll never make that curve there. So we were in plain view of it and saw it when it hit. And these three houses that were shelled in, there was now when it landed, there was a big long light pole or something, or it was a great big thing, just about where we were standing. Well, it hit that pole first, and it splintered that off and landed right down there. And I hope, I don't know who it was, but anyhow, I hope to take the engineer up and put him. There was a concrete wall right on each side of where the branch goes under the building. And he fell out of the cab down between, he was laying between the engine and the wall that was there.
I wonder if we can walk down a little closer to that.
All right, yeah.
And did you say you found the engineer laying in the branch down here?
Well, he was between the engine and the wall outside, you know. They call them cupboards, I believe is what they call them. But anyhow, he hit, his engine hit right there, right under the windows of the building. But it didn't hit the building. It hit right under the building. And he was thrown out of his engine down in that trench there where it went under that. And he was between the engine and that wall when we picked him up and put him up on the wall. And he probably breathed 2 or 3 times. And that was all to him. Now the fellow that was sitting on the safe, him and the safe come out together. And the door busted off the safe. And they carried a lot of money on that train. It carried no passengers or nothing. It was just a mail train. And when that door busted off that safe, there's a lot of money poured out there on the ground. Well, it kind of knocked him senseless like for a little bit. And he was up then and got the money up, put it in the safe. And they called for a mail truck to come over and get him. Of course, it wasn't a truck. It was an old wagon with a wire around it, you know, and a lock on the door and horse pulley.
Yes.
So they carried it over town. Being on Sunday, there was no banks open or nothing. They put him in the safe over there in a hotel. Stayed till Monday morning. That's all I ever heard about him. But he told me, I talked to him some. He told me that about the 2nd or 3rd time that safe saved his life. He said, I don't know if I don't quit this time. That's what he said.
Yeah, it's probably time to quit after going through that 2nd or 3rd time there for that. But this will show some of what it looked like afterwards. You can see a Danville police officer right here with a badge and hat and billy club sitting on the wreckage. And this gentleman right here, and I know I can't show you the ones on the far side of the room, but the fellow kneeling down right here in the middle is my great uncle. He was a section foreman for the Southern Railway. He died before I was born, but I've had 3 of his daughters look at it, and they all said, that's Daddy. And they knew the Daddy was called out that day to the wreck. So that was pretty good evidence, I think, that is my great uncle there by marriage. But at any rate, this shows what it looked like. This is another view looking. You can see how close it came to striking the Dan River Mills building there in the distance. It was very close. And this last car, I have a letter from a gentleman who was a postal clerk in the last car and survived. And I let him review the research. This was back in the 60s when I was first doing it. And he reviewed what I'd come up with, and he said that was accurate, that he thought what we put together was really what happened. This shows the postal car here, and he says he was standing at the door holding on to the catcher arm. You can see that right here. And when it went in there and said, I can hear that glass from the windows shattering over me yet, is what he said. And you can see the broken window right there. But this is a list of those who were killed and injured in the wreck. 11 people killed and 6 injured. All those were killed with the train crew and postal clerks on the train. And then the injured were all postal clerks who survived. There was one man, W.R. Pinckney, who came out, and may have been the one with the safe there, that was not injured to any significant degree. He came out, but you can see these 11 people killed that were killed and 6 injured. The locomotive here, this is a photograph that was taken several days after the wreck. You can see the locomotive has been sat upright, and it was a brand new engine, as I mentioned earlier. It was less than a month old, or just about a month old. So they towed that engine back up out of that ravine, towed it down to Spencer, North Carolina, and put it back in service, and continued using it until 1930, when it was cut up for scrap in Princeton, Indiana. would have been wonderful to have had that to put over there as a tourist attraction. There's another view of that wreckage down there. This is the engine as it looked after it was put back in service and continued to be used until 1930. That's where it had looked like a few years back. Now, that building is burned down since, and that is no longer there. There's nothing left over there to see as far as landmarks or anything of that nature. Absolutely nothing left there now. Another view looking back into the ravine where it used to be. As I say, the railroad track was abandoned in 1935, and then in the 1940s, Route 58 was put through there, so the entire scene has been obliterated and doesn't look anything at all now like what it did back at the time. And that brings us back to the marker here. Did anybody pick up on the era in the marker? 9, and I said 11 were killed. One of those folks who were killed did not die until October 6th. And the other one was, you remember the young man, Wentworth Armistead, that got on down here at the foot of 9th Street? He was not supposed to be on the train, and apparently he was in the lead car right behind the engine. His body was the last to be recovered, so no one knew he was on there. Apparently, when they got the information from the marker, they used contemporary newspaper accounts that said 9 people, not knowing that Wentworth Armistead was even on there because his body wasn't recovered until Tuesday after the Sunday wreck. And then one of the fellows didn't die until October 6th. So that accounts for the discrepancy in the marker right there. Not a tremendous thing, but nevertheless, it is an error in that. This it's amazed me over the years the number of people who had ancestors that were some way touched by that. Either they were traveling that day or they were at the scene. There was a church picnic going on that day. It was you can imagine if a 747 were to crash here in Lynchburg, what a calamity that would be, and that was very comparable to what they had over there in Danville. A lot of people, ran out to the scene, and a lot of folks locally had ancestors there who were there, or either traveling, and their travel plans got disrupted because the track was blocked there till late the following day on Monday before they could run trains through there again. They had to detour trains from here in Lynchburg down to Burkeville on the Norfolk and Western, and then get on the southern Richmond-Danville line and go on to Danville to detour around this. When I made this talk some years back over in Danville, a gentleman, Mr. Hoyt Newman, came up to me afterwards. Mr. Newman had been a naval aviator in World War II and was, again, in World War II, was flying bombing runs over Japan and the area over there. He said he was laying in his bunk one night on an aircraft carrier, and they were just listening to Tokyo Rose. I trust most folks know who Tokyo Rose was. She would come on there in the English language and say things to try to demoralize the American soldiers. And he was laying there just, listening to her jabber on, just have something to do, listening to music. Said, all of a sudden, she called her and said, "This is especially for Mr. Hoyt Newman." And it just struck him, how did she even know his name? And she said, "You're over here bombing our homeland and all of that, and I want to make you as homesick as I can for your home in Danville, Virginia. And this song is just for you." And played the wreck of Old 97. Now, how the Japanese knew that, who knows? But because of that song, the story has traveled far and wide. And which I guess other than that, the story would not be alive today were it not for that. But that covers most of the things here. Those of you who have not had a chance, I hope you'll be sure to take in the railroad display downstairs. Doug Harvey and his predecessor Tom Ledford have done a wonderful job here in Lynchburg preserving our Lynchburg history, and they have a great railroad display set up downstairs. But I wonder if anyone has any questions on anything I said, or maybe you can add something to it, like Mr. Newman come up and told me that afterwards. Yes, sir.
I always heard there was a crate full of canaries in one of the...
Yes, sir. You are exact, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because invariably, for some reason, I forget to mention that every time. After the train wrecked, because you can imagine the dust and steam and all the commotion, but they were shipping a load of canaries on the train. I think they used the canaries in coal mines, that if the gas got too heavy in a coal mine, the canary would fall over, and that was a warning to guys to get out of there. So they were shipping those canaries somewhere. The train wrecked, and broke the cage open. The canaries come flying up. And I've heard people in Danville say that there were quite a few yellow birds flying around Danville for many years after that. I guess the cats probably enjoyed it too when they could catch a canary bird. But I thank you for bringing that up. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When they had a big celebration about this over in Danville, they used butterflies. And I thought that was a great idea. They just turned loose a whole lot of butterflies to represent the canaries. The other thing is that one of the best recordings of this is by Boxcar Willie. Probably you've heard of Boxcar Willie. But believe it or not, with all the thousands of copies that went out, he's got the train running in the wrong direction. How helping he has, I know.
Well, there are quite a few little errors. If you caught it, when that we first showed that tape, she said it was running from Monroe to Spencer, Virginia, as North Carolina. But and there are a lot of little variations like that. The song, there are even a lot of different versions of the song. As they said here, this was the Statler Brothers' first song in 1964, and I trust some of you all are Statler fans like I am. But this was also the first million seller in what we call country and western music back in 1924-25, recorded by Vernon Dalhart. You can go on YouTube and Gordon Harper, you want to share that with us?
A big lawsuit about who wrote the lyrics to this song.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was a big lawsuit about that. The fellow David Graves George, who was a telegraph operator at Franklin Junction or Gretna, came over and he supposedly pinned down some words and went back to the barber shop in Gretna, and somebody said, well, that sounds real good. We ought to make a song out of that. What about the tune of the ship that never returned? And so they put that together, but there were several other people, and I can't say who wrote it and who didn't. There was quite a bit of, there was a lawsuit that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court arguing about who wrote that song. David Graves George got $65,000 and some odd dollars from the Victor Talking Machine Company, but then they had appeals and went on, and no judge knows how those things work.
The case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the reason that the man who wrote it lost out was because he failed to get a lawyer, which ought to teach us some reasons. He never got a copyright on it.
Yes, sir.
At least that's what I heard now.
There's a very thick story written, and in all honesty, I didn't delve into the court case as much as I did the actual wreck, but it's been a lot of back and forth over that.
Howard, I thought it was worth mentioning when we were researching a little bit about the wreck. Vernon Dalhart was the name of the guy that had the song, but that's not his real name. He changed his name to Vernon Dalhart. He started out as like a Marion Slaughter, and I think I'd probably stayed with the Marion thing, but why he picked Vernon Dalhart, nobody knows.
Well, Gordon Harper here shared with me on YouTube. You can go on YouTube, and if you put in on YouTube on your computer, Vernon Dalhart, D-A-L-H-A-R-T, and Old 97, you can see some of the old type records, both the like the 78 and the third type record and the cylinder type thing that were playing. You can see how they. I had not seen those till Gordon pointed them out to me. But that, if you go back into history there. Yes, sir.
You said the contract was to take mail from Washington to Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
Did that also include taking it back from Atlanta to Washington?
No, sir.
So they would come back empty?
Well, they would run the equipment back possibly on another train. There was no contract to go north. Like, for example, in later days, you would have a southbound train, say it might be like number 97, an odd number. The northbound train would be 98, but there was no 98 to go back. And I'm not sure, I can't tell you why, I don't know.
I heard one thing that the railroad division was, I heard anywhere from an hour and a half. The car said it was late when he arrived in Monroe. And, but there was a substantial penalty by the ministry.
Correct.
But it's not being, and so the railroad, the guy who was originally supposed to be the engineer, had to run a special train in Greensboro. And the railroad had decided they were going to run a two-piece train and let him go ahead on. So they would
Claim that was it.
hopefully keep the penalty.
Boy, that penalty, I had heard a story like that they were trying to play some games there or something, but there was a substantial fine. I don't know exactly how much per minute, but the railroad was fined so much for each minute the train was late getting to Atlanta. So they put a lot of emphasis on keeping it on time, but there was no way that he could have made up a lot of time. In fact, I have a copy of what they call a slow order that was issued up at Rapidan, Virginia, telling him to run 1 hour late between 2 points north of here from, I forget, Rapidan to Monroe or somewhere like that. Yes, sir. They had estimates all the way. I think the maximum speed was supposed to have been down to like 15 or 20, but they had estimates all the way from 35 to 80, 90, going down grade, making 90 miles an hour. I think that was overly exuberant, but it's just people's opinions. I was real amused. One fellow here got several statements from people who saw the train that day. And Mr. L.C. Jordan, and this always just struck me as amusing. Mr. L.C. Jordan wrote later, said, I came to Danville in August 1903 and was boarding on Farrow Street. On Sunday afternoon, September 27th, I went to the toilet, which was in the back of the garden near the railroad. When I came out, I heard a train coming. Knowing it was 97, I stopped to watch. It was coming down the track running about 40 miles an hour. That was his guesstimate. But it always just struck me as amusing, the man out there tending to his own business and see something like that. Yes, sir.
What do you know about the 38?
The 38? You mean like it's not 38, it's old 97? That was a northbound train, and why they put that in there, I don't know. As far as I know, and John Arnold, you or Garland may know, 38 used to be the Crescent, 37 and 38. Used to be, and I don't know if it was back in 1903 or not, but the Crescent was a hotshot passenger train that went north.
They had named the train the Crescent then, but the 38 became the Crescent.
Right, so that may be where it ties in, and maybe that just kind of fit into the lyrics of the song. That, this is not 38, but it's old 97.
Some people have suggested it is kind of like the airplanes. They'll have a certain route to go, and that's one route, and others has another number. And so that's a possibility that they were talking about the route like the airplanes do. I don't know. That's far out, but that's a guess.
I think usually the trains would be numbered, and that indicated a certain train would run a certain schedule and be at different locations at a certain time. It was given a number like 97 or whatever.
Was the premier passenger train.
Right.
And the only thing that preempted the line was the fast mail train, which was 97.
Right.
But other than that 38 preempted the line to make sure they got on time.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, old 97 really wasn't that old. It only lasted, what, 4, 5, or 6 years?
Correct. They took it out of service in 1907, January 6, 1907.
Sent forward to an article on it.
Yes, sir. You did. You did.
The contract wasn't renewed, old 97, or 97.
Yeah.
Old is simply a term of endearment, I think.
Exactly. Exactly. It was not that. It was not old. And the Congress failed to appropriate money, and they took it off in January 6, 1907 was the last. So it wasn't that long.
I always heard that we always called it Steve Brody, so Brody had been fired on in Norfolk Western for running too fast.
Right. They called those guys back at the time boomer engineers or whatever, and that kind of indicated they might get in trouble on this railroad, but if they had the skills to run an engine or whatever, to go get hired on another railroad. And I kind of wonder if that's not what happened to him. And he got the nickname Steve because of a guy named Steve Brody who's supposed to have won a bet by jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. And so that kind of indicates maybe he was a little bit reckless too. And as far as why the wreck occurred, someone mentioned earlier, the bottom line is going too fast. Well, why was he going too fast? And we'll never know. You know, I've wondered at times, this was not his first run of 97, but he may have been unfamiliar with the location till too late. He ran up on the curb. It's kind of like if you're driving your car down a road that you've been over before, but you're not real sure where a sharp curve is. And all of a sudden you run into that curve before you expect it. Maybe that happened. I understand, and I'm not a engineer mechanic by any means, but I understand that if you put the brakes on approaching a curve and then accelerate through the curve, that you can somehow create a vacuum and use up air quicker than it can be rebuilt. So maybe he did that, and maybe there's some kind of mechanical air brake failure. You would think maybe if the conductor was paying attention, that they may have tried to slow the train down going down that White Oak Mountain grade, about a 3-mile grade. But for whatever reason, they didn't, and he was just going too fast, whether he didn't know where he was or whether it was some kind of mechanical malfunction. They had a coroner's inquest, and that was the bottom line. The train was going too fast that day. Yes, sir.
Did it suddenly just derail? The tracks weren't damaged? You said
the tracks were damaged. The tracks were damaged, and that trestle was damaged. And it took till late the next day to get it repaired. Okay. But they worked all night. Said they pulled the locomotive up to the south end and shined the light down in there and had lanterns right there and everything working. And they got it reopened the next day on Monday. But it wasn't delayed there. Yes, sir.
Where does the 3-mile grade begin and end?
Well, it would end about where the wreck was, right near the river, and it would begin up there at a place called Lima, L-I-M-A.
Well, that's called Lima, and a lot of people call it
Lima.
And sometimes that word gets into the song and stuff.
Exactly. You know where it says, and the lines on a 3-mile grade, I think what he meant was at Lima or Lima.
That's
a
right
3-mile.
Across the 41.
Yes, sir. You know where that is.
It's about a 4-mile grade,
I don't know precisely, but I know where it goes through Danville, and if you don't know where to look today, you'd never know the train track was over there if you don't know where to look.
Along 41.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can tell that. You're exactly right.
Anybody else have a question for Howard?
I'll be here a few minutes, and anybody wants to.
Wonderful program. We've got some refreshments over here in the whole building.